Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Public Access TV. My name is Doug Goodman, and tonight's show, entitled Tiger Talk, is going to be shown on Public Access TV. That's Charter Channel 8 and 19, along with Knology 35 and 80. And of course, Tiger Talk is a very special show with a very special guest, Superintendent of Marshall Public Schools, Mr. Clint Willard. Welcome, Clint.
Hey, Doug. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, and it's always a pleasure to have you here on Public Access TV. And of course, Tiger Talk is a way that we really bring the public up to date, keep them informed and engaged in some of the events, the issues, in all the various programs that are happening at Marshall Public Schools. And it's, of course, late here in October. It's been a great month, lots of busy activities. And this show will be viewed, like I say, on Public Access TV over the next couple of weeks. So we once again hope to bring you up to date. And we have kind of a special title for tonight's show. And I know you picked it out and worked with your staff on it, and we're entitling it Mythbusters. And it's something that I think, as we all know, stories, rumors, different things circulate all the time in our community. And that's why I think this is a great show to help talk about some of the things that are myths, some of the things that are truths, and really give people the facts of what's happening. Now, maybe before we get into that, and I just mentioned October, any fall wrap-up things you want to touch base on for our watchers?
You know, it is a busy time, and we've reflected on that several times as we've gone through the fall season here, reflecting on our student activities and, of course, curriculum things that are going on. And we've talked to different leaders and other people that are in our systems, and it has been a great fall season for us in terms of our curriculum, some of the programs and things that we've added and brought into our programs and into our schools, and not to mention some of the other things that have gone on with our students. Student activity is a big part of that, we know, and the skills and the things that students learn from our student activities. And football team lost a tough game to Hutchinson. Goes off to our student athletes and our coaches and the entire community for supporting them. And we know that we still have a lot of other activities going strong, and cross country, and not to mention volleyball, and just a host of things that are still continuing and going on. And we know we'll be wrapping up soon, and we start that transition to fall, from fall activities to winter activities. And again, it's an opportunity for the community to come out and see what our students are doing and to be engaged with what our students are doing. And it's an opportunity that we're excited about as we transition and make that transition to winter activities and winter curriculum things. And it's real exciting to see all the different things that have gone on, and we talk about a host of those things, and I know we'll talk about some of those things more as we get into the future, such as post-secondary enrollment changes that we've seen and enhancements that we've made with College in the Schools programs and all those curriculum type activities, not to mention the extra and co-curricular things too. So, and I know with that, marching band's wrapping up too. They've had probably one of the best shows that they've had in times, and I know it's just been a real treat and a real favorite of mine to watch this show and these students perform. So we're excited to wrap up the fall activities and transition into the winter things, and thought this time would be a good time to address some of those rumor mill things that are out there and some of those myths and address those, because I know that as we face an election season, that's typically when the myths are running rampant, and it's just because it's the time for rhetoric, and it's a good time to address some of those things head on.
Well, we're sitting here in Studio One, and we're about 7 days away. And of course, this is recorded, so you'll see this over the next couple of weeks. But we're about 7 days away from the election, and of course, education is a topic. It's a hot topic in our election, from local elections to the national elections. And of course, Marshall Public Schools is our local dominant topic here. And of course, as part of the election rhetoric, there's a lot of discussion about the expense of public recreation. And, you know, is it a true investment, or is it just a drain on our tax structure? And of course, I'm going to let you take that, and some people think this or that, but maybe just clarify that so everybody knows exactly what the facts are.
You know, it's a great thing to bring up, Doug, because we've heard recently, and it's come from as local as we can get with our local legislators at times, raising the question about investment in dollars or the expense of education, and when you look at how that's been played out at a state level, then once in a while we've heard the governor recently. I was at a conference where he addressed the conference, and he made the statement that never in the history of his governorship, nor before that time, has there been a sustained period in history where the expense of education hasn't been in some sort of a crisis mode with budget cuts and budget reductions. And so heavy on the expense rhetoric. And we know, again, at the national scene, there's been talk and rhetoric from both of our major political campaigns, the Democratic side and, of course, the Republican side, where one is saying that education is the economic future for our country. Another candidate is saying that education is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. So the importance of education is clearly stated on multiple fronts and through a host of different avenues. And tonight and during this show, I'd just like to share a few pieces of information that are statistically grounded that really address how education is truly an investment. And right now we know that we can look at the presidential election, and there's running rampant the theme, well, it's the economy, stupid. Well, it's more than that, and there's a lot to talk about in terms of the educational components and investing in those things. And recently there's been some research that's been done. It's by a group called Growth and Justice in Minnesota. They're a nonpartisan think tank that really looks at the structures of funding public infrastructure, roads, bridges, those types of things, not to mention the systems that are essential for our public to enjoy the things that they've come to enjoy in Minnesota, education, local government aid, those types of things. And in their recent research, they really took a hard look at the invested dollar and the return on investment in education. And it's really setting the tone for some of the things that are moving forward in what is going to be proposed legislation. We talked in an earlier show about the Minnesota Miracle, the new Minnesota Miracle, and that new funding mechanism. And just a few points of reference that I'd like to share with our listening and viewing audience tonight when we look at investments in education as opposed to educational expenses. When you look, first of all, they start talking about early care and how an investment of $1 in an early care program, and this is if they would target a program for families that are at 185% of the poverty rate. So it's a pretty large threshold that we have here. But from their research, the Growth and Justice in Minnesota, they realized that for every dollar invested in early childhood programs, at the end of that investment, it equates to roughly a $6 benefit in terms of the return on investment, if you will. They also looked at kindergarten through third grade, kind of that early programming then. We had the pre-K programming, now the early programming. And looking at a program that would be an investment for about 36,000 students that are below proficiency in pre-kindergarten through third grade, and this is below proficiency in the areas of math or reading. For every dollar invested in programs and services for those areas, it would equate to a $10 benefit at the end of the assessment on the process. Through 5th through 8th grade, those students kind of caught in the middle school students, and I know, Doug, those are some students that you work with in the after-school programming and the community services activities. Those 5th through 8th grade students working to improve the graduation rate. And this is a program that they've suggested that really targets specifically our Latino populations in the state. And this goes to some important information. Again, not to get too heavy with facts and information here, but right now it is projected that over the next 30 years, from 2000 to 2030, so the pattern that we're in right now, the Hispanic or Latino workforce growth, or those people that are aged 25 to 64, that workforce age, is going to grow by roughly 270% in the state of Minnesota. So huge growth. So you can understand why an investment in specifically Latino-based programs are pretty important. So for every dollar invested there's a $2.90 return benefit. So again, it's realizing some real benefit in terms of dollar invested and return on that investment. Just a couple more points of information. 9 through 12, grades 9 through 12 students, and this is targeting those students, and there's about 160,000 students across the state of Minnesota that are below proficiency levels in assessment results in both math and reading. So not one or the other, but both math and reading. For every dollar invested in those 160,000 students, it equates to roughly a $6.50 return of benefit for the state. And then finally, post-secondary or post-high school, looking at really supporting through some programming, some efforts to enhance opportunities for post-secondary education and encouraging post-secondary education for students. For every dollar invested there, it's a $5 benefit back to the state. So there have been some quantifiable pieces that have been done. It's been done by PH level researchers that have really processed all of the information that goes into funding education. And when you look at those facts that have been presented, you can see that education is an investment. It's not just an expense, and it becomes an investment though when those dollars are focused and targeted. And that was some very insightful information that I found, and I hope it clarifies a little bit for our listeners about this debate and discussion on the expense of education versus the investment in education.
Well said, and I think once again, as this election time of year is occurring, education is one of the most important topics that needs to be discussed, and I'm glad that we had a chance and you shared all that information. It is important. It is something that if you do get a chance to visit with some of our candidates, bring up education. I think that's something that you have to do, that each of us has to do.
Absolutely, and so much of it hinges on quality investments for our future with our kids, and I'm reminded of that every morning when I wake up and I send my little first grade daughter off to school and my fourth grade son, and of course they're excited about everything else that's going on, but we really have focused conversations about the quality of education that they're receiving, what they're doing in their classrooms, and then in turn how they're processing that information when they get home and how they're applying that information when they get home. So it's such an important piece for our community to really engage in terms of that conversation, and we've been very blessed here in Marshall. We have a community that understands the value of education, supports the value of education, and that again is something that we take very seriously as we look at engendering and keeping that support from our community, because we know without it we can't do what we do at the school system, which is provide and continue to try to provide the very best for our students that we can.
Super. And along those same lines, I think we kind of move into our next topic, and that's I know that the school board, there's a couple of candidates. There's an election going on for our school board, city council. Our local elections are right now in the process. Once again, everybody's voting in 7 days. There's also there was a community forum that appeared before the school board, and one of the questions that I want to mention was a question about a donation to the university regarding the regional event center. And of course, once again, when we think about myths and truths, I need to ask you about that. Was that a district donation?
That's a great question, and it is a misperception that it was a donation. When you look at the Regional Event Center, and I hope that everyone that has the opportunity to listen to this show has an experience with the Regional Event Center, because it really is a shining star in our community and an outstanding facility. But it's important to understand some of the history that went into that, and before I get into that, I'll clarify the record right now. No, it was not a donation. The school district is prohibited by law to give donations, and it is something that is focused on a particular element of the Regional Event Center that aligns to our programs and our offerings that we have, and really fit with where the district is going in terms of our programs and offerings, particularly in some of those extracurricular activities. When the Regional Event Center was being constructed, there was a question about our intention as a school district to continue our long-standing tradition of playing our football games in particular, and more recently some of our soccer games in the evening. And we know that if we didn't have lights, that we wouldn't have that opportunity. We would have to look at a different location if we wanted to continue that, or we would have to look at some other methodology of playing, which for those schools that don't have lights, they typically end up falling on a Saturday afternoon, and that's really tough with all the different other activities that we have. Particularly, you look at like a marching band in Marshall where you run into those type of conflicts. So we had a conversation with officials from the university, and we started to discuss what it would mean to not only the community of Marshall, more specifically the school district of Marshall, if we had lights. And from there, we evolved into this conversation about, all right, what is a fair level of payment that the district could pay for the lighting in the facility? Because we are the primary consumer of those lights with our Friday evening activities and of course other activities that go on as well. And as that discourse and that discussion took place, there was some back and forth exchanges between the university and the school board and the school administration, trying to figure out what would be appropriate and what is the right investment when we look at those lights. And what we ended up arriving at was a $10,000 annual payment that comes not out of general fund dollars, but comes out of capital outlay dollars. So we're not taking dollars that would be used to educate a child, which is our general fund dollars, and that's dollars used to pay for teachers and the teachers in the classroom, the teacher supports with teacher aides and paraprofessionals. Those are general fund dollars. This is for capital improvements, dollars that go into brick and mortar and roofs and those types of things. So it's out of capital funds, $10,000 on an annual basis, and it has a lifespan of 10 years. So it's not a forever thing that we entered into with the university and the partnership. And when we started this conversation, it was really looking at it from a macro perspective or a large perspective. What's going to benefit the university? What's going to benefit the school district? And through that partnership, most importantly, what's going to benefit the community of Marshall? And we can look at how that's unfolded. We've played 4 football games out there. We've had just wonderful attendance at those games. We've enjoyed, once again, the pursuit of excellence, and that was under the lights, and we had people raving about what a great venue that was and how wonderful the lighting was for the pursuit of excellence, which is really a community activity. We also have hosted soccer games out there, which again is available because of the lighting and the support that we have with the lighting. Now we can take it one step farther, and we know that coming up this Friday night, Halloween night, the Regional Event Center is going to play host to 4 football games, and it's playoff time here as we're sitting here talking this afternoon, and that is all possible because of some strategic investments with dollars and a great partnership and relationship with the university and the school district. All of that is about enhancing the community and enhancing the region and enhancing our opportunity as a school district. And anybody that questions whether or not that was a good investment and a good use of dollars, it really comes down to the question of, could the district reasonably build, maintain, and operate a stadium of that quality for $10,000 a year? And the answer is absolutely no. And it's almost a rhetorical question because we know that the answer is no. So we can be very thankful that through this partnership and relationship, our kids are playing on a first-class facility. They're getting great exposure to a wonderful opportunity where our fans have a great experience when they come to the Regional Event Center. And it's an enhancement back to the community because as these other schools come in and utilize that facility, whether it's for the pursuit of excellence, whether it's for these playoff games that are coming, and whether it's other playoff games or other sporting activities into the future, we know that those people are buying gas in our gas stations, they're staying in our hotels, they're stopping at our shops and our stores, and it's really about economic development as much as anything. So we believe that this investment in the lights was a good use of an expenditure and not a donation.
Well, there we go. We've got a clarification on that one. And thank you for that, because it is and has been something that the community has really talked about this fall. And as they've watched it go up all through the summer, people were wondering, man, what's it going to be like, and it really is a case, and we found that to be true. If you build it, they will come.
Absolutely.
And you're going to see that when those 8 Southwest Minnesota schools come in and play in those state high school league football playoffs. And then the following week, the state high school first round quarterfinals will be also at the REC. So what a great venue, what a great example of collaboration that has occurred. And of course, it's been a real benefit for our Marshall Public School kids, our programs, and of course the community. And with that ties into our next topic, which of course, people say, man, Marshall has marching band and they have all of these sports and all of these activities. And is it true that Marshall Public Schools, and I think this came out in one of those candidate forums, is that Marshall Public Schools spends way too much money on activities?
And that's one of those ongoing things that we hear year in and year out, and it's something that, as much as we like to continue to talk about how little we spend on activities, there's still a perception that there's a lot of money spent on activities. And I think a lot of that's fueled by what happens at the national level. When you look at the multi-million-dollar contracts that people get and receive for shooting a basketball or catching a football or kicking a soccer ball, we're not to that level, and we never will be in high school activities. High school activities are roughly about 3% of our district-wide budget. So it is a very small amount. But we know that those dollars are well invested. Why? Well, when you look at what activities provide students, there's some phenomenal things that come about from the process. And a real joy of mine as the school superintendent is I have the opportunity to take students from the high school, seniors, to our Rotary Club, our noon Rotary Club here in town. And during our Rotary Club visits, the students present information about their high school experiences. And time again, our students reflect back on experiences that they had related to activities. And they'll talk about the skills that they've learned. We recently had a young man do a presentation about his experience participating on the football team, for example. And what was interesting about it is he's not a starter. He's somebody that has a role, and he plays that role on that football team. But what he shared was absolutely heartfelt and touching, because he shared how participating in those activities gave him an experience to understand that team is greater than the individual, that everybody has a role and everybody has to fulfill that role, that everybody has an opportunity and that opportunity is presented, and what you do with it is completely up to you as an individual, that there is a time to cry together and a time to celebrate together. And he went on to expand on how that has all been fostered and developed through that team experience working with others on the football team, and the relationship with the coaches and the relationship with the community, and that whole experience and the dynamics of that experience. And we know that none of that would be possible without those activity experiences. And it's about those type of skills that we know as our employers out in our community look at things. What do they want? They want people that can work on teams. They want people that can communicate. They want people that come to them with work ethic. All those things are realized through the activity experience. So the 3% expenditure is really a pretty good 3% investment in the future of our youth and the future of our community when we look at those skill sets that are developed and enhanced and then ultimately experienced through our activities programs.
What a benefit. And I remembered that 3% because one of our first shows this last fall, we had Bruce Remy, our activities director, on, and we talked about the budget and all of the extracurricular activities, programs, and for that to be only 3% of the budget, that's really a great exchange for the dollars with the benefits that these kids and the families and the community receives.
Absolutely, and when you look at all the activities that are encompassed in that 3%, it includes not only the football and the basketball and the hockey and the wrestling and the soccer, those traditional type activities, but you're talking about things, the dance line, the marching band, the choir experiences that our students have, Business Professionals of America. Some of our FFA programs run through that budget. You also look at other clubs such as Knowledge Bowl. All of those things are encompassed in that budget, and it's something that again encompasses so many of our students. And when you look at the fact that I believe the last numbers show close to 70%, if not over 70% of our high school student body participates in some sort of extracurricular, co-curricular activity, for 3% of our budget to impact over 70% of our kids, that's a pretty good return on investment.
That's a great return on investment. And of course, maybe we could take this time, 3% is still 3%, but there's a lot of people, especially our booster clubs, that really contribute, isn't there?
And that's a good point to bring up, and a real thank you to them, because we know that without their support and their help, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And I look at the little things that happen with our booster clubs, whether it's a spaghetti dinner for the team before they're taking off somewhere, or packing sandwiches and beverages for the kids, the sports drinks, those types of things. Being the #1 fan, wearing that orange and black, and being out there, all those little things that our booster clubs and our parents do to really support what happens. And I know our M Club has really been very aggressive in terms of what they're trying to do this year, and a real credit goes to them and their leadership. It takes a community, and it takes an engaged community to make our schools great, and that's what we have with those programs and those opportunities. And hats off to every single person that has worked with and ultimately will work with our booster clubs, because it's so important to keep our parents and our community engaged at those levels. And you're right, a big thank you goes to every one of those people, and I can't say that enough.
Well, I know that Jess Nelson, sitting behind the cameras, has already given us like 5 minutes left. And I've got 3 or 4 more myths that we wanted to cover, but we're going to have to maybe pick out just a couple. In fact, maybe one out of these 4 or 5. And is there one in here? I know one of those we talk about as a myth is that the district has within the last year made some significant investments in the programs and services. Some suggestions, or maybe some people have said that we're only doing this for a few students versus all students. Your thoughts?
Yeah, good question. Very recently I received a question that it was very interesting, because in the course of about 24 hours I received 2 communications, and we've talked about the communications on this show and how we encourage people, if they have questions, to reach out to the school superintendent or others at the school, and we continue to encourage that and support that, because we want to have that engagement and want people to know that I'm accessible, so that if they have a need, a concern, or an issue, we can hear it, we can deal with it, and we can continue to improve. But in the course of about 24 hours, I'd received one message that said, "Mr. Willert, this school district does only things for our highest achieving students and doesn't do things specific to the needs of our students that are struggling or emerging learners." Again, within 24 hours, I also received another message that said, "Mr. Willert, I'm concerned that our district is so focused on improving the needs of our most challenged learners that we're really not doing enough for our top-end learners." And so within 24 hours, I heard from both perspectives, and the answer to both those things is we do everything for all kids that we possibly can, and that's mission-driven. Our mission says that Marshall Public School District 413 develops the potential of each learner for success in a changing world. And we know that we need to do that by providing opportunities that run the gamut for our students. And what have we done? It goes right back to where we were about a year ago. We were sitting in these chairs. We were talking about election time, but it was a little different election, because we were talking about operating referendum at that point in time and what that meant to our schools. And what did we do with those dollars? We've invested them to address the entire spectrum of our student body. On one end, we've looked at implementing and growing our College in the Schools program, so students can sit in Marshall Public Schools and take for college credit courses and opportunities that are working with and fit with the MnSCU system, so they can leave with college credit in hand when they walk off the stage with that diploma. And we've done that with some of our very best students and some of our very brightest students. So we're keeping them right on our school campus, and we've done it in vocational programs, in our FFA and VOAG programs, as much as we have some of those other areas such as English and mathematics. So we've done that. We've also addressed the Freshman Academy, which is really for those emerging learners, those that need that little extra boost to support them. We've also been able to do some things with our special needs programs and enhancing those programs to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our special needs populations and our students that are identified with special learning needs. And part of that also goes into investments into maintaining low class sizes so our teachers can provide as much individualized attention and instruction to the students as possible. We've trained all of our staff on what's called differentiated instruction. We heard about that in an earlier show. And all of those things have been made possible because of investments with the interest of all kids that we serve, not just one end of the spectrum or the other. And one of the things that has been realized too as part of this is the internship experience, and we talked a little bit about that before. And what's interesting and what people need to understand is that internship experience is not simply going to a work-based experience, learning some apprentice type work and then applying that. It encompasses a great deal more than that. There's a paper that's written, there's a significant amount of research that goes into a given profession so that students know what it takes to be successful in that chosen profession. There's ultimately a presentation of that profession that will go before community members and business leaders and employers. So it's a very encompassing process, and the beauty of it is through all of that experience and that experiential learning, our students are getting college credit again. So we've done things that really speak to how students learn, that speak to what students need to learn, and really address on the continuum our very best and brightest learners and those that are emerging learners. And it's been a very dynamic process, but we're not about one particular segment or another. When we say in our mission that it's about the potential of each learner for success, each means each, all means all, and that's what we're committed to.
So very well said. And I think, I'm glad we had the time to talk about some of these myths. You've done an excellent job of clarifying several of them. I wish we had more time because I've got 3 or 4 more questions. But I want to encourage everyone, and I think we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show. If you have questions, and if you would like to even make suggestions, I think it's so important that you contact our Marshall Public Schools. And of course, if you do have questions and maybe it's after hours or something, you can go on to www.marshall.k12.mn.us.
That's correct.
Or you can also go to www.swmn.org. And there's a phenomenal website at both of those spots that you can find out so much more about Marshall Public Schools.
You can find out so much about Marshall Public Schools, and it's an opportunity for them to interact with the school system by clicking on to email addresses and providing some input, providing some feedback, and we would do our very best to return calls and to respond to emails within 24 hours from the time that we receive them. That's something that we've been working very hard to do. And when you look at it, people may think, well, it should be easy to get a quick response and something that I want to have right away. We do need to have a little bit of latitude with that 24 hours because we're serving well over 2,200 students. And that means we're serving a vast number of parents and community members in the process. So we do our very best to respond, and we'll continue that commitment going forward because we know we rely on the support of the community. The community is relying on us to do the very best that we can, because ultimately it goes right back to where we started. Our collective future depends on it. And that's probably a pretty good way to start wrapping up, huh?
That sure is. And of course, that brings us to the end of the November edition, and we will once again be taping these shows every couple of weeks. And of course, this is Tiger Talk here on Public Access TV. I'd like to thank our special guest, Superintendent of Marshall Public Schools, Mr. Clint Willert. And once again, the purpose of Tiger Talk is to provide you, the viewers, some informed and engaged information on how you can find out more and get involved with our Marshall Public School systems. On behalf of Superintendent Willert, my name's Doug Goodman, and we want to thank you once again for watching Tiger Talk here on Studio One Public TV. Thank you, and see you soon. Good night.